So Belgium pulled off a massive comeback yesterday against Senegal to go through to the next round, knocking them out in a game that they were second best in for about 85 minutes, to be honest. But um, going back to the start, I mean, Senegal had a very good start to the game. It was all Senegal really in that first half. They were creating a lot of chances. It felt like the goal was coming, and when the goal did come around the 25-minute mark, it very much, felt like they had, they're worthy of the lead. They've been the better side at that point. Sarr hits the post and Diarra on the follow-up finishes. Senegal 1-0 up, and are able to get to half-time with it being 1-0, with them being the better side. And that theme does not stop going into the second half. Senegal were on top in the second half as well. Belgium, they try and find a way to get the equaliser, but Senegal still looking pretty threatening. It doesn't take them long to extend the lead. Ismail Assar, the ball comes down, he takes it down brilliantly and finishes excellent as well. And it's a really, really good second goal. Senegal, and from this point, it feels like a very long way back for Belgium. The game they've not really been in, a game they've not really shown quality in, and a game that Senegal have been very good in. They've took the games to them, they've been the better side, they've taken the chances. At this point in the game, it was looking like Belgium were on the way out, and it was looking like that Senegal were going to progress, but. For a while, and for a long, long time, Senegal they kept themselves in front. Belgium, they tried to force the way back into it, but they were keeping them at arm's length. And at that point, Belgium I thought was seriously underwhelming, and I thought they was heading for another really, really disappointing tournament, another disappointing exit tournament. They've not done that much better than they did in 2022 World Cup, and. Well, it would have been a disaster, and this is really was the final show for this World Cup. Really is the final show for some of them are already retired, but for what's their golden generation, where you've got De Bruyne and Lukaku are the last sort of two remaining from that particular team. And when De Bruyne come off yesterday, it was when there were 2 new goals behind. It very much looked like this was his last tournament. It very much looked like he's made his last appearance of Belgium in a major tournament, and it felt really symbolic almost seeing him go off the pitch. But he does still have at least one more game in this tournament, possibly more if Belgium can play the way they did in that final 5 minutes. But like I say, at that point, Belgium just not doing it. And before the tournament, they wasn't really spoken about Belgium much. Some people said, yeah, they got a decent side, they could go quite well this tournament. But a lot of people not really paying much attention. And I think they certainly wasn't fancied the way they have been going into the tournaments in years gone by, mainly because of. There's not been as much talk about them since they've sort of had some of these players from that sort of generation retire. But I do still think, they've had a lot of other decent players come through. We do know that if they all did perform to their best, they could be good. But in the group stage, they just, especially in the first 2 games, the draw against Egypt and then the 0-0 with Iran, they didn't really overly impress. And I think, the Egypt game, they got going a bit towards the end. The Iran game, they was second best, really. Showing up against New Zealand, but, still unconvincing because... And it was only, with all due respect, wasn't in New Zealand in the day where they put the 5 goals past. But coming into this game, it felt like a game that could go either way. It felt like it was going to be a really close game. And for 85 minutes, Belgium just barely did anything, and really, really uninspiring. And Senegal, up until that point, was so good. But their defence, once their defence was breached, they just seemed to lose all confidence. And I'm not really. They'll be looking back at this with a lot of regret. They won't really be sure what happened because they were there. All they needed to do was just keep control and see the game out, and they couldn't do it. We see Lukaku come off the bench as well. And to start with, I'm not really impressed with him at all. I think he's not. What was always going to be a worry with Lukaku was, he's come off the bench for Belgium to try and have an impact. I know he has done in the previous games, but it very much felt like when it gets to the round of 16, the round of 32, the fixtures aren't getting any easier, and you think the physicality could be an issue because when you think that he's barely played any football this season and he's the one they're expecting, they're leaning on to get them back into the game, and he comes on, and to start with, I just think he's not really running. He's just sort of hanging around the box, waiting the ball to come to him, and it's just not. I wasn't particularly impressed, to be honest. Eventually, he gets his goal, 85 minutes in. Was it the 86 minutes? Yeah, he gets his goal, and then just before the 90s, Tielemans is able to get one as well. Makes it 2-2 out of nowhere. We go to extra time, and it's just incredible turnaround. They come out of nowhere, and from that moment, Belgium, they're starting to look the more likely. I think, Senegal going into extra time would have been very dejected, very, it would have really have sort of taken the momentum out of them, because they were so close, they were so nearly there, and they'd be so disappointed the way they let it slip yesterday. But after the group stage as well, they were competitive in the Norway and France games. Definitely second best though. Really beat Iraq, very convincingly, easily to get through the third. And then coming into this game, it felt like a real opportunity for them. And even when they was 1-0 up, it felt like, yeah, this game's there for the taking for them. And then when they went 2-0 up, I thought, okay, that's it now, surely. And the longer it went on, it just looked for sure like they'd see it out. But the Belgium just out of nowhere just seemed to show up. And I think it'll be. Yeah, I don't know what to make of them really. I just think, well, they were so poor for so long in this game, but then they just out of nowhere turned the form on, and I just think, how is it going to go in the next game? It's impossible to say. But of course, they do eventually go through, because in the literally, it looks another game destined for penalties. Literally, the final kick of the game was a penalty that they won. Foul was given against Kamara in the end, where Tielemans takes it, and he seems to be the man so far for Belgium. The big player for the big games, and then of course he scores. Game doesn't go to penalties. Belgium score in the final minute when it's too late for Senegal to do anything about it, to go through to the round of 16. So yeah, I mean, that's crazy game really. One of the standout games of the tournament. Massive comeback as well. I mean, no one would have seen that coming, but Belgium do eventually go through against Senegal. And the later game was the United States taking on Bosnia. And the United States still ultimately win to set up a round of 16 game against Belgium. Them two play each other in Seattle, where Belgium played yesterday, so that'll be good for them, not having to move out of the city. But no travel for them ahead of the next game. But United States to get through again with a convincing win. One issue though that we will come to, that they could have coming forward into that next game. But of course, Bosnia, I always thought it was going to be a tricky game for them. We know they can be a tricky team. For the group stage. Overall, the Switzerland game fell apart a bit at the end, but otherwise, been very competitive, strong against Qatar, convincing there. Had shown a lot against Canada as well, had a lot of good moments in that. So I think coming into this game, it was always a potential banana skin for the United States here, as they look to have one of they're probably their most successful ever, most ever successful tournament they're hoping for. But definitely, close first off. I think Bosnia did have some chances in that half, but the United States were creating the better ones. They have the goal chalked off, but then they do eventually find the breakthrough. Balogun does eventually get his goal, which puts them in the lead right before half time, going into that second half. And I think the theme sort of continues going into the second half. However, quite early on, or the second early on actually, is 65 minutes in, Balogun gets himself sent off, and this is a real worry going into the next game. Player that's been so good, so prolific in front of goal this whole tournament, they're going to be without in the next game against Belgium. That's a real worry. And it's a shame. It was a bad challenge, but it goes to VAR. It was, it was a sort of stomp on the ankle almost. It was a reckless challenge, and I think you can't really argue with that being a red card. So it's really, really unfortunate for the United States. It's really, really unfortunate for a player that's been fantastic this tournament. But well, that's how it goes sometimes. And from there, Bosnia though they don't find a way back in against the 10 men. The United States are able to see the game out, and they do. Again, another one chalked up, but they do eventually score. Tillman scores from a free kick, actually, a really, really good strike of the ball, and that steals the United States victory. So very, very good for the US. I'd say convincing win, but definitely a blow not having Balogun. Red card, it's suspension that comes with that as well. It's a real, it's a problem. It's going to be, they'll be gutted, and it could be a bit of a worry going forward. But yeah, they do get through. And with a good performance as well. So that's it's just about getting through in these tournaments. So that's all we can really say for the moment. But Belgium against the United States coming up next in around the 16th for both of them too. That'll be interesting.